Everything Francis Ngannou has achieved has been beating the odds. That is one of the most shocking things I've ever seen. Conor McGregor has 2 more fights left in the UFC. I think there's a strong chance you end up seeing him do some kind of crossover fight.
Welcome, Misfits Boxing fans. I'm Ben the Bane Davis, joined as always by my co-host BL. Today, we have a big episode, but before we dive into it, BL, how are you?
I'm very well, Ben. How's your day been today?
It's good. I've had about 3 cups of coffee, so a little bit below average, but we'll get there.
So today we'll be addressing the rumored Misfits event, Ryan Garcia's recent developments, taking a look at Warner Walton's future fight, diving into Jake Paul's latest fight announcement, and of course, the showdown between Anthony Joshua and Ngannou.
Let's kick it off with this colossal clash. It could potentially be the fight of the year. AJ versus Ngannou. The matchup's got the entire world buzzing. I do believe that Francis Ngannou can stop Anthony Joshua. Here's why. I know you're already disagreeing with me. Bear with me for just a moment. Everybody throughout his entire career has counted out Francis Ngannou. He was homeless. He was in the sand mines of Cameroon. He was arrested several times. Counted out, doubted. Like, this guy is impossible to bet against, BL. So I'm picking Francis Ngannou. I'm planting the flag. Come at me.
Don't get me wrong, the whole story you gave me there, I love it. And I really am rooting for him in a certain sense. Yes, if he won, I'd be really happy to see it. I'm saying if, because I do not believe he's going to win. I honestly do believe we've seen a new Anthony Joshua, someone that is motivated, hungry, and he really showed an ability that Tyson Fury did not show against Ngannou. He's going to cause Ngannou a lot of issues, especially with those quick combinations, those heavy punches. I don't know how Ngannou's going to deal with that, because when Tyson Fury put those combination punches in against Ngannou, he looked stressed. It didn't look great for him. So when you have someone like Anthony Joshua, who has the power, who has that ring presence, I do believe that's going to be a long night for Ngannou.
I want to add this. Some of boxing also comes down to the team around you, right? It takes a village, and there are few better individuals in the combat sports world than the tag team of Dewey Cooper and Eric Nixick, which Francis Ngannou has worked with extensively, and Dewey Coops has got a lot of confidence in the Predator, as do I. But you know, we'll see.
Well, let's shift back gears to Misfits Boxing. We've got some exciting updates about the recent card that's sort of been announced, I guess. Well, I mean, Taylor Holder has now officially put it on his Instagram, Twitter. He's put it on his socials. Misfits is happening in Dallas. What do we make of that, and who will he fight?
I love it. Everything's bigger in Texas, and I hope that this Misfits event follows suit. Taylor Holder, will say, saw him hit the pads. He looks good. And the call out of Bryce Hall is interesting because Hall's got Knucklemania the month before. Let's not pretend like bare knuckle boxing can't change you, can't add some injuries and prevent you from, you know, a 4-week turnaround. So I'm not sure if Bryce Hall could be locked in as the opponent, but whoever they stick in front of Taylor Holder, guess what? I'll be watching. BL, I gotta say this. One matchup that's got fans buzzing is Warner Walton versus Fox the G. It's shaping up to be potentially a super fight, with the winner possibly earning the right to challenge Dean the Great down the line. What do you make of this fight?
That excites me for several reasons. They're similar age and they're really talented. Boxer G, if he wins this 2v1, he's going to be a superstar. Now, myself and Ben off camera, we were speaking and we said what a superstar Boxer G is shaping up to be. If he can get an emphatic KO, wow, this guy is on another level. Warner Walton has me interested. Yes, his performance was slightly underwhelming, but he has that superstar power and he can be a headliner alongside Boxer G. Well, speaking of MVP, Jake Paul has now yet again made an announcement of his return on April 26th. But could this be the highly anticipated matchup versus India's Nareej Goyat?
That's the only matchup that makes sense. India's most promising boxer in 2008, Mr. Nareej Goyat. It's time, as Bruce Buffer would say. I just don't see who else is in the pool of potential opponents that's not named Goyat, BL.
He's here to take over. He's called out everyone. He wants to take on Tommy Fury. He wants to take on KSI. And I see him winning by first round KO each fight.
Oh, sleeps him. Nareej absolutely sleeps him. I'll say this, BL, it's time to coin it, time to patent it. The Goyat Gang, with you and I as the co-founders. Let's go, Nareej, baby. Now, to change gears a little bit, a shocking development in the boxing world does revolve around one young Ryan Garcia, who's been making headlines lately, but potentially for the wrong reasons. BL, I am very concerned about Ryan Garcia.
I agree. I mean, the only way to say is concerned. You know, a lot of people are laughing, a lot of people taking taking the mick out of the situation. But when you're preparing for a fight, especially to this magnitude, this is the last thing you really want. He just doesn't look himself, really. I mean, he was someone that was so passionate and so forward thinking with boxing as well. And now he just, I'm really not sure. I mean, I'm lost for words, really. I'm trying to put the words together to understand what's going on.
It is hard to point to another case of an individual that has just diminished and crumbled as much as Garcia has. And you'll hear about this in our interview with Luke Thomas. But the mentality that Garcia possessed a little bit ago to where he's at now, I mean, listen, I wouldn't be shocked if the fight doesn't occur. I hope it doesn't, because it's going to give him unnecessary brain damage and will put him on a worse trajectory. Ryan Garcia's focus for 2024 should not be competing. It should be taking care of himself and focusing on his headspace. Now, if there's anyone who can provide some expert insights into the upcoming Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou fight, it is none other than renowned combat sports analyst Luke Thomas. Please welcome the renowned combat sports analyst, Luke Thomas. Luke, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Very caffeinated, Ben Davis. How are you?
Fantastic, sir. Really pleased to have you. The amount of years that you have invested in the combat sports scene, I believe more underrated than most. Tell us about your work in crossover boxing.
I've done, I think, 3 of Jake Paul's fights. So I did the first and second Woodley fight, the Anderson Silva fight. I did not go to the Diaz one. Did not go to the Tommy Fury one. So there's obviously been a couple that I've missed as well. Oh, and I did Logan Paul versus Floyd Mayweather as well. I was there for that one. So I've seen some of the silliness. I've seen some of the cooler parts as well. Jake Paul's horse tried to bite me when he fought Anderson Silva at the press conference outside there in Arizona. So yeah, I've earned my stripes a little bit.
When the first show that you did in crossover boxing was the initial takeaways and reactions, because like you sort of mentioned there, it's a really unique, different taste than maybe traditional combat sports.
So, I mean, the first thing I would say is in terms of boxing audiences, it's a lot younger. Also, the other part is I think the crossover boxing sort of YouTube / whatever version of it you want to call, it's a lot of MMA fans too. So it's unusual. Yeah. It's pulling from a slightly different audience for a different product. And that changes a lot of different things, by the way, about the racial demographics. But more than that, it's just younger. And then I was at Paul Silva, and I recall they showed like David Benavidez, who's like from Arizona, on the big screen, and the audience, like, they mildly applauded. They didn't really know who he was, I think. And they showed Sugar Sean O'Malley. Okay, well, they went crazy. Let me tell you something. I've been to Tank Davis fights. They couldn't do that at a Tank Davis fight. You know what I mean? It wouldn't exactly work. So it's definitely pulling from a very young, very kind of different crowd in that regard.
What I want to touch base on is that Jake Paul fight. We've just spoken about some previous fights. Let's get up to date to that recent TKO of his. What did you make of that?
The guy had some experience, but nothing too dramatic. Jake Paul's a big puncher. We knew that already, though, right? Like, there was no question he's a big puncher. And he marched through the guy and got him out of there. And I know what the standard response is going to be. It's like, oh, who are these other guys fighting these elite pros when they were 10 fights in? And it's a fair point. I'm not asking him to take on, David Benavidez, anytime soon or something like that. But I think the point would be to sort of circle back to what you asked, like, what did you make of it? I just don't know what to say about this case, because Jake was clearly better than him. There was no real test. He blew the doors off the guy. We can't really make a better assessment until we get better information. And that only happens with a better opponent.
Well, let's dive into some more intriguing of a matchup. Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou. Talk about the insanity of this, because the fact that it's coming together in the first place is not something that people would have ever anticipated.
It's so improbable that it shouldn't be happening. You know what I mean? When I first started watching MMA, when it first started getting popular, the wall between MMA and boxing, there was no crossover. Understand, MMA already before did have kickboxing crossover in that world, did have jiu-jitsu crossover, did obviously have scholastic or Olympic wrestling crossover. There was no crossover with boxing. None. Didn't exist. And now top stars are battling each other for huge money and gigantic audiences, at least we think in general. It's so improbable as to be almost a Hollywood script.
Speaking on the opposite side of the coin, Anthony Joshua at 34 years young, coming off the win over Otto Wallen, what version do you think shows up in Riyadh?
It's kind of funny. I thought Deontay Wilder was going to win his last fight, then he fell short, and then I thought Anthony Joshua was going to underperform against Otto Wallen, because remember, he busted up Tyson Fury when they fought, and that was much closer than anyone expected it to be. And in the end, it was actually kind of the opposite. Deontay underperformed, and AJ looked fantastic. So first of all, what I would submit is there's no way Anthony Joshua doesn't come having taken Francis Ngannou's power seriously. There's no way he's going to come in here being like, oh oh, I'm just going to march through this bum. I don't think he's treating it that way at all. You look at the individual things he has going for him. He's a prodigious jabber to the body upstairs. I actually feel like you're probably going to get a great Joshua who looked great in the Wallin fight, looked aggressive, pushed behind the jab, didn't just sit there and touch and go. Yeah, I mean, Francis, it's an amazing opportunity, but make no mistake, he's got his work cut out for him. Everything Francis Ngannou has achieved has been beating the odds, getting out of the sand mines of Cameroon, crossing the desert, living. I mean, everyone knows the whole story at this point. Every interval is something that tripped up very talented, very smart people. This guy has the ability to make things work in this world that ordinarily do not. That does not mean I am picking him. I still, I just have a hard time believing he's going to beat Anthony Joshua. That does seem crazy. But then someone's going to clip this and they're going to be like, here was Luke Thomas ahead of the fight. Totally got the prediction wrong. I'll just say this. Never, ever underestimate Francis Ngannou's ability to beat the odds or surprise you. That said, Anthony Joshua should win this.
Well, let's take things back a little bit. That performance against Tyson Fury, what did you make of Francis Ngannou on the night?
We were doing a watch along that night for our podcast I do with Brian Campbell, Morning Combat, and we were treating it like a big joke. We were treating it like, good for Francis, going to get a lot of money, good for him. That no one was mad about that, but come on, Tyson's just going to wipe the floor with him. And then he gets dropped in the third round. And I thought to myself, that is one of the most shocking things I've ever seen. The lineal MMA heavyweight champion dropped and then ultimately diminished the lineal boxing heavyweight champion in boxing. And that was truly, genuinely, no BS, shocking in the most delightful way possible. And here we are with him coming back to the scene of the crime to see if he can do it 2 times or maybe even better.
Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. A current trend that we're seeing is obviously MMA fighters transitioning into boxing. Now, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think this trend is going to continue for the longevity?
When we say trend, I do think you will see the practice continue, but it will be uneven and it will be very case-by-case scenario. Francis, again, beating the odds in these ways are just really incredible. Like, we're not really supposed to be here talking about Francis boxing Anthony Joshua. Like, this is like comical to even say, 2-3 years ago. Listen, Conor McGregor has 2 more fights left in the UFC. I think there's a strong chance you end up seeing him do some kind of crossover fight. Just be honest. I'm not asking anybody to like it. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just asking, if you're a businessman, would you bet on Conor McGregor versus Jake Paul being profitable? Yeah, I'd take that bet. Sure, I'll take that bet. I want a space where I can absolutely check out the very best at all times fighting the very best. If I'm being honest, and I'm not, again, this is not me individually endorsing this fight or that fight. It's saying, what is the job of a promoter? The job of a promoter is to put on fights that people want to pay money to see. To the extent there is a market for that kind of thing, and you've got just the right MMA name, and you can make money with it, there will be money to be made. Simple as that.
Who is the best boxer in the UFC, Luke Thomas? I know you got to weigh in on this one. Age-old question.
I don't know if he's the best, but the way in which he used boxing in MMA recently, which is a different thing than who's the best boxer in MMA. Dude, Ilia Topuria, that was a very, very clever piece of work he turned in to capture the featherweight strap. I might have to tip my hat to him, but, Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, these guys are always in conversation.
Shifting focus back to Misfits Boxing. What is your take on this promotion? Because obviously Misfits is one that is entirely self-contained with the influencers and more of that type of crowd, that demographic. What are your perception of that world?
Listen, if I could just be completely honest with you, I'm 44 years old. I'm not the target demo.
You tell me that you're not in for HS Tiki-Taki, Luke Thomas?
But it's hard to explain. Like, there are guys who are my age, and it takes a while to transition, but I think I'm fully on the other side of this. Let me explain something to you. First 20 years of your life are a slow crawl, and you feel like, oh my God, like the next 20 are going to be just as slow. The next 20 are going to go by like lightning. They are not like the first 20 at all. And as a result, you begin to really see the distance between what your youth produced and what the next generation's youth produced. You guys are literally Nick, if a generation's 20 years, you guys are right behind me in that rotation. They make different products for different people, all driven by who is young at that time. I'm not even doing one of these things where like, it's not for me and therefore it's bad. It's not for me. It doesn't appeal to me in the way in which it might appeal to somebody else, but it was never designed to. It doesn't really necessarily even matter if it does. It is, to me, entirely a youth movement, and it's tied to that, and I think it's really best understood on those terms.
a beat on the promotion, because a guy who I feel carried the prime card in some way, shape, and form is Dylan Dennis in terms of the marketability, but maybe not the fight itself. And it's weird because coming from an MMA sense and world, you have a lot of respect for Dennis's accomplishments at ADCC and the BJJ. But for these influencer boxing fans who all they see is his boxing against Logan Paul, they'd probably be like, who the heck is this guy? What did you make of Dylan Dennis? Loaded question. It's a loaded question.
I remember vividly when he was part of Marcelo Garcia's brown belt all-star team, and it was a few guys. It was him, it was like Mateus Diniz, Manchier Kara, Jonathan Satava. There was a bunch of these guys, and these guys were just rolling through and just murdering everybody, all of them. And Dennis was a big part of that as well. Obviously got promoted to black belt, and then it just didn't quite go the way it was supposed to. I'm just trying to point this out. He didn't have a lengthy black belt career at all. But it was right before this, I did an interview with him because the guillotine had started to become popular in MMA again. He was still part of I think he had just gotten black belt. It was a big deal. And I interviewed him about who had good guillotines in MMA. You can check this out on MMAfighting.com. It's called The Rise of the Guillotine. And he actually had pretty good perspective. But then I'll never forget, as soon as the interview was over, he was like, yo, pass my information to, because I was working with Ariel at the time. He was like, pass my information to Ariel and tell him to put me on the show. And I was like, I don't think this is how that works, but I see where your head is at. And he, to your point, like that's where all of his time and attention moved there. He's a big what if to me on the MMA side, but like honestly, like in terms of watching him box, I mean, it's just, dude, there's just not enough there to even grade.
Well, I wanted your opinions on something that happened as of recent, and it was a bit of a bizarre enigma, really. I think that's the best way to describe it. It was Sean Strickland sparring a streamer, and he beat him bad. I mean, it really looked horrible. I didn't know where you got a chance to see that.
I did. I got mixed feelings on this one too. Listen, at the end of the day, I think that UFC fighters should be very, very careful about, in general, who they let into their orbit, and then who they're willing to do basically like MMA stunts for. It's all in good fun, I think, is how they perceive it. And I think most of the time it actually is. You know, not this case is a little bit different, but many cases, you know, for the most part in these things, nothing bad ever really happens. But you get a guy who's a physically elite trained fighter with just a humble fucking streamer. That's a mismatch, boys. That's a mismatch. You know what I mean?
But talking about people walking around with sedated tigers, he's got a big matchup with Devin Haney. What is your takeaway of Mr. Garcia over the last handful of days?
We interviewed him, myself and Brian Campbell. We interviewed him because there was a 2-day press tour for Gervonta Davis when he fought Ryan Garcia. And I went back and I watched that interview, and it's unrecognizable. There is a clear difference in his demeanor. There is a clear difference in, for a while there, his voice, which comes from partying, obviously. I am not a doctor. I do not know exactly what is going on, so I'm going to speculate, and it's worth no more than that. But I'm going to guess he's having issues with sobriety. And the question is, how many different substances are contributing to that, at what dosages, and at what times of day? Whatever the answer is, it's not putting him with his best foot forward. I mean, let's be clear about this. Even before I saw any of this, when the fight was like getting made, and I was like, oh, Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney is going to take him to school. I firmly believe that. Devin Haney is a very different level. I personally believe, we shall see, but I personally believe that Devin Haney is going to tune him up like a fucking guitar.
To me, that only puts him on a worse trajectory. What do you think Ryan Garcia would turn into?
I still thought what he was doing was a miscalculation. I always want guys to fight the toughest opponents that they can, but within some degree of reason. I did not think the Haney fight made sense for him. I thought Floyd's message about fighting Rolly Romero first, potentially getting the belt, and then going up made significantly more sense. But in the case of Ryan Garcia, if he takes this fight and it looks bad, I honestly wonder if he might become a cautionary tale. Here's a guy who had a big Instagram following. He fights Tank Davis. It doesn't go well. He fights Devin Haney. It doesn't go well. In fact, it could go quite poorly. It's like every time he's stepped up to like somebody who's really on that level, it has gone, again, this is under the assumption that it goes poorly against Haney. Like, you'd be like, well, dude, why would you take these fights? And it could actually have an opposite effect of what you would intend. So sketchy times, my friend. Sketchy times in the sport of boxing.
BL, any final questions for LT?
I was just going to say, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and I wanted to give you the opportunity, we've done a lot of talking, to give any messages to your fans there and anyone sitting at home watching this video.
I don't know if I have any message. I can just say, if you want more of someone as old as your father yelling at you about shit, you can follow me, youtube.com/Luke Thomas, or you can do youtube.com/Morning Combat with a K, because we're very original and funny. There you go.
Now that we've heard some insights from Luke Thomas, it's time to settle the score once and for all. BL, who wins the showdown between Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou?
You both have me swaying. You really do. I mean, I really do like this story of Ngannou, but like Luke Thomas says, I just don't see Ngannou winning this fight right now.
I have to side with something LT said, which was there are a lot of ways that Ngannou can come out of this winning, just like he did with the Tyson Fury fight. Maybe not officially getting his hand raised, but the stock of the Predator continuing to rise. I see that occurring. Guys, you're trying to bet against one of the most powerful punchers of all time. What an episode, and with an exciting fight weekend ahead, Misfits News is always leveling up. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, comment downstairs, and ring the bell. Join us every Tuesday and Thursday for some more breaking news, expert interviews. I'm Ben the Bane Davis, and for BL, we'll catch you next time on Tuesday.